What if one of the most important decisions in any election happens long before election day? Before anybody casts a ballot, before the debates happen, before the campaign signs start popping up in various neighborhoods? What if something as simple as a map could shape who has power, whose voices get amplified, and whether an election even feels competitive in the first place?
Today, we're talking about the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a law created to protect Americans from being blocked or intimidated from voting, and how it unexpectedly connects to something people love to complain about but rarely understand: gerrymandering. Those suspiciously squiggly voting districts and with that somehow always seem to benefit somebody.
Because underneath all of this is a bigger conversation about fairness and trust. What does it actually mean to have a fair democracy? Is equal access enough, or should representation matter too? And if both sides of the political aisle feel like the system is somehow rigged against them, what happens when people stop trusting the rules of the game? At what point do we stop asking whether democracy works and start asking whether people still trust how it works? Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom.
So I think that it is really easy to sit here and say the Voting Rights Act of 1965. How is that relevant today? What does that even matter? This is 2025, 26, 2026. I don't know, man. So we started asking some questions just amongst ourselves. And I feel like the more that we started looking into it, the more relevant it all became, the more you know kind of situation. And so I think we should dive into what actually was the Rights Act of 1965. Why did we need a law to be put into place to stop racial discrimination in voting? Like, part of that just blows my mind. What? Why?
Yeah, because you already have amendments in place that are supposed to give every American the right to vote. So, where did this part come from that we needed additional? And you just passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. So, again, you're like, where did this come from and why?
Well, I feel like I've said this several times, but really specifically in an episode a couple of months ago. What is it that humans do with systems again? They find ways to exploit them.
Yeah.
So,
So when you find a loophole, you have to add a new set of rules on top of it to prevent that loophole.
right. Because before 1965, many, especially Black Americans, especially in the South, were prevented or discouraged from voting by using tactics like literacy tests or poll taxes, intimidation strategies, physical violence, and even arbitrary registration rules. So the Voting Rights Act was designed to enforce the 15th Amendment and stop racial discrimination in voting.
And yet we're still talking about it today. And it's still gone through the Supreme Court with a lot of people asking if the Supreme Court now is taking all of the oomph out of this act. So something's there.
So we are granted the right to vote as American citizens in our democratic republic, right? But what does it actually mean to protect a right such as voting? We have lots of rights that we've been granted. What does it mean to protect a right?
Well, I mean, I would say it would be to put rules in place that would prevent specifically the government from infringing on those rights.
I mean, if you've got all of these obstacles in place, you have to take a literacy test and poll taxes, and it's scary and all of these things. Is it really a right if all of those obstacles make it dangerous or nearly impossible to exercise those rights?
Well, and remember that the Constitution originally gave the states the jurisdiction of how to establish voting, but this law became a federal law, which covered all of that to make it, you know, a federal even a federal crime if you were circumventing what was supposed to be already set down by amendment.
Infringing on those rights. Because
Yeah.
I think that there's certainly a difference between, Cole, you've said it before. There's a difference between in theory and in reality. And so I think that we have to kind of take and apply that same logic here. There's a difference between we're all equal under the law versus all being equal in practice.
There was also a component that the DOJ was trying to fight so many of these, but what was happening is that every time that they would win something and get one thing taken care of, whoever was trying to circumvent this would just, create a new alley to go down. And so the DOJ was constantly trying to make sure that people were able to vote, and it just wasn't working very well. So President Johnson wanted to bring it in. I mean, he intended to wait for it, but then went ahead and said no. When he first took office, he went to I think the AG and said, I want the toughest thing that you can find, but decided not to bring it forward because he was cautioned on doing that, especially so close to the Civil Rights Act. But then it kind of got to where it was just there wasn't a there were more reasons to go ahead and bring it forward and put it to Congress and make it, you know, a real point that he came through trying to get this done.
So to kind of back up here just a little bit, I think there is a misconception about many acts and laws and amendments in our Constitution about them being airtight.
Mm,
And one thing that I want to highlight here is traditionally in the United States, we have had two primary political parties at a time. They have not always been the Republicans and the Democrats. But when you have something like that, a bipartisan system such as ours, and they have to come to some form of agreement to get something done, to get something through, but their end goals very rarely align, it is much more difficult for something airtight to be created. And I think that that is likely intentional on both sides of the aisle in instances like this to say, we're going to pass this legislation, but there may be something a little bit more sinister inside it, which is why we get, especially nowadays, these new acts and legislations that are thousands of pages long, that it's unlikely to impossible for anyone voting on passing this legislation to have actually read the legislation and understand and know what is in it. And we just keep creating, yes, the systems are more complex, but the more complex a system is, the more likely it is for it to have loopholes, multiple loopholes, potentially.
right.
So
Failures, points of
I don't
failure.
even sure, but sometimes I think those points of failure were left in intentionally.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So, Cal, I don't
So
think we answered your question about what does it mean to protect a right. And I don't know if I even know how to answer that question. I mean, I guess, Cole, that's what you're getting at is laws are meant to do that. But if you leave so many loopholes in the laws or you make them one sided, are we really protecting rights?
maybe, but you may not be protecting rights evenly.
Mm,
Maybe you're protecting the rights of one subset of the demographic of a nation, but not all.
Right. And I think that that was part of the kind of issue, I'll use the word, with the Voting Rights Act, because a lot of people took and looked at it and said, oh, this is necessary accountability. We want our government, both state and federal, to be accountable to saying, hey, this is what we mean. And we want people to be able to vote. If you are an American citizen, this is your right that has been enshrined by the Constitution. We want you to be able to vote. But then on the other side of that same coin, there were people who looked at this act and said, this is federal overreach. Like Cole mentioned, this is supposed to be left up to the states, and they get to decide who and how everybody's voting and what their specific laws are. The federal government can't come in and do this. They don't have this kind of jurisdiction, if you will.
So this is a weird thought that just kind of came to me. If you look at the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, one, they're all relatively broad and they're all relatively short and straightforward. This right shall not be infringed. This right shall not be infringed. And sure, there's a little bit more meat to it than that on some of them, but none of them are more than a paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
And the further we get from that, the longer the great experiment runs, the longer and more detailed and more intricate these amendments seem to get.
I think that's a valid point. I mean, even if you look at this one, it was supposed to help existing amendments and then existing laws. And so you're right, Cole. We're just building on trying to fix the thing that the loopholes that we found in the previous version.
Right. But if you have, let's say you're building a building, what's going to be more structurally sound? One made of boards with bricks wrapped around it, or one that's solid concrete? All one piece.
I would think the solid concrete would be.
So the more pieces you add to this puzzle, again, the more potential loopholes there will be. So what's the primary loophole we want to talk about today?
So that leads us directly into gerrymandering, right? So I've been thinking about this all day long in preparation for this episode, and we have looked at lots of different breakdowns of how to explain gerrymandering and what makes the most sense and how this is all being used and abused as a concept. But I think that in my brain, I'm thinking about a pie, a round pie. And I think for me, it made the most sense when I started thinking about there's only so much crust on a pie. And in my personal opinion, the crust is kind of an exciting part, right? And so you can cut a pie to have every single piece of the pie get some of that crust. Or you can be a little shit and cut out all the outside and take the whole outside just for yourself. That's my piece.
I only got this little bitty tiny piece of pie.
I only got this
It's
little
only
piece.
this wide.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was thinking about it just in terms of gerrymandering. It's the same thing. It's the same process, right? So I'm thinking back on the history and how the term was originally coined, which I think is funny. But so gerrymandering specifically is drawing voting districts in ways that help one group maintain political power. And there are two general concepts for how gerrymandering is used. They're called packing or cracking. So packing is a concentration of opposing voters into a few districts, right? So again, that's the one piece of the crust. And say, hey, I cut this crust piece in only 3 pieces. So Callie gets some and Cole gets some and Tom gets some. Sorry, Mecca, no crust for you.
Yeah,
And then
all the
you've
pieces
got,
of pie weigh the same.
yeah,
They're all a quarter pound. But I've
yeah.
got 4 inches of crust, and Callie's got 4 inches of crust, and Dad's got 4 inches of crust, and Mom has 2.
Sorry, Mom. And then there's cracking. So cracking is splitting opposing voters across many districts so that they lose influence everywhere. So everybody gets one little tiny morsel of crust and a bunch of pie. And
I
so,
have so much trouble understanding this, especially when I think of it, because they use this term majority minority. That's what the
mhm.
recent Supreme Court kept talking about is the majority minority. And I just keep thinking, okay, why can't we just You put 1,000 votes here and 1,000 votes there and 1,000 votes there, and it doesn't matter because won't that turn out eventually? If you've got 1,000 voters, and I guess it doesn't really because what if 500 of those voters don't show up?
Yeah. So think about it this way. Think about it as you've got a big circle, and because we're thinking about maybe like the layout of a city or a county, they tend to spread out in not perfect, but kind of like a circle. Let's say in the inner city, the central, you have 20% of your population that all have a tendency to vote similarly. And then on the outer skirts, you have the other 80% of your population. And that 80%, that outer ring, that's all one voting block. And this particular municipality or precinct, whatever you want to call it, they say, okay, we're going to make 10 districts and we're going to make all of these districts, whoever wins the most districts, their vote is what's going to count. So let's say they take and they find the pieces of that outer ring that has the 80% of the population that are, let's say, less inhabited. And so they include those in precincts with the inner core so that the 80% is only 2 districts. And
It
the other
offset.
20% is 10 districts. So the inner core gets to really control who wins those elections.
Oh,
Does that
that
make
was a good
sense?
yes, that was a good explanation. Thank you.
It's the same as Callie's pie. It's just pictured a little bit differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
Mhm.
So, is gerrymandering cheating?
Yeah.
I would say yes. It's
Is
it's a
rewriting the rules
loophole.
so that only you win fair?
Right.
So is it cheating?
I mean, yeah, it feels like it, and I just can't quite figure out how everybody doesn't stand up and say, "That's cheating. Do this right."
Well,
Figure out
they
how to
do.
fix this.
But again, in a bipartisan system, you have 2 primary electorates. And if the thought is, well, my side is cheating, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I mean, that's a general sentiment for one.
It's a tug of
For
war.
a lot of people. So
Yeah.
if their side is cheating and winning, it's fine. If the other side is cheating and winning, then it's not fair.
So we're in a situation now, this may not be relevant. We're in a situation now where everybody's trying to get more seats. So if you take Cole your example of a city where 80% are in the center and they're voting specifically one way, the assumption there is that they're voting the way that the majority wants. And so you want more people there voting to support that goal, right?
Sure.
But again, it's this massive tug of war dick measuring contest. That's what it is. And you can see it as in the recent happenings. Hey, Texas has redrawn their maps so that they can get more seats for Donald Trump, for Republicans. Okay. So then you've got California and Gavin Newsom who are coming out saying, you're going to pull, we're going to pull back. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite extreme here. We're going to make sure that Republicans have less so that we can counteract you. So that that tug of war, the handkerchief that is in the middle of that tug of war is just kind of staying in the middle, right? And there is,
Oh, so
it goes back to what Cole said a minute ago. If I'm cheating and winning, okay, but if you're cheating and winning, it's not fair. And so it ends up again just being this stick measuring contest of who's pulling harder, who's pulling most recently. And I think that the sad thing is all that that does is end up with the American people face down in the mud.
I started to
Yeah.
say it doesn't give you actual ideas of what the American public want, but just sections of what the American public wants.
The
Right.
sections that you agree with.
And it's the sections of people who have power to maintain that power. That's the whole purpose. I don't like what somebody else is doing, so I'm going to go over here and do this fairly legal strategy maneuver so that I can do it differently, so that I can
We
maintain
can't
some of my power.
we can't stop people from voting, so we're going to make their votes count less.
Or
To
we're
tie
going
it
to make
back
it
into
harder.
yeah, to tie it back into the Voting Rights Act of 1965, we can't
Right.
stop you from voting, so we'll just make your votes not count.
Do y'all think that is this a Democrat Republican thing? Is this a black white thing? I mean, the Voting Rights Act specifically was to give Black Americans the right to vote without having to jump through all kinds of hoops and everybody y- trying to prevent that from happening. So at this point, do we still need the Voting Rights Act? Because it doesn't affect the gerrymandering.
I think it set the stage for gerrymandering to be more important. Gerrymandering was already a thing then, but I think it elevates the need for those in power to utilize it as a tool. At the
Oh.
time, it was racial. Now, I think it's likely more economic. But again, this is an issue with a bipartisan system.
It's not black or white or Democrat or Republican. It's one versus the other.
It's tribal,
Mhm.
which is extremely difficult to escape because it's genetically ingrained into us to be tribal.
It makes me wanna get out there and just start campaigning for all of the independents to just make that kind of that 3rd
Wave.
party. Yeah, and say, "Look, you can fix some of this. You can take control of some of this. If we all stand together as independents."
Sure, but I think we would need to be careful with that because that's been done before. It's the same reason it hasn't always been Democrats and Republicans. We have this bipartisan two-party sentiment. Because let's say we go and we find all of those independents and we build a new party and they come in and they win and that kicks the Republicans out. Well, now it's just the Democrats and the new third party. When
Yeah.
you go back to it was what was it James Madison in the Federalist 51? Political parties should be as numerous, if not more numerous, than the number of citizens.
Yeah.
It should be individuals working as individuals. Sure, they can work together, but they should be working as individuals to better the nation, not groups of people working together to better it for their group.
And so I think that when you take into consideration both the Voting Rights Act in conjunction with gerrymandering, that's when all of this starts getting really hairy. Because you've got people out there, again, from both sides of the aisle of the two-party system, who are drawing these maps intentionally, again, Greg Abbott versus Gavin Newsom, to help their specific party, to help them maintain control, the control that they want. I mean, then you start throwing race in there and fuel on the fire, and it becomes incredibly divisive, and it's just a whole huge mess.
Yeah, I mean,
Is
and
there
And
and I
any
think
way
you're exactly right. I think at this point it's just throwing gas on the fire. I don't think that's the it's not the wood that's burning. It's the lighter fluid they're pouring on it. And it's a
Mhm.
distraction because I don't think that's the root of the issue.
What do you think is? Is it just the
Power,
two-party system?
power and greed.
Okay, here's my Cole comment for the day. You're not ever gonna be able to get rid of power and greed, but how we wield it, we have a little bit of control over. So how do we wield power responsibly? Is that even
Separate
an
it,
option?
eliminate concentration of it.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
You have to put firm mandated limits on it, for one. Term limits for Congress has been a huge thing that American citizens have wanted for decades, that we
Yeah.
need, that with our current system will most likely never be implemented.
Yeah.
So to say, you can't come in and sit on this spot and abuse it for the rest of your life, which again is not a single party abuser of this. It happens
No.
across the board, period. That's a great first step to say, hey,
Yeah.
you can come in, you get 2 terms to do what you're trying to do, and then you get to go back to the real world and just be a normal person.
I love
I
the
mean, I
idea of
also
term
think that
limits.
we've got to do something with the PAC money. There's so
Yeah.
many solutions here, and we're not doing anything to move towards those solutions. It
Well, I mean,
certainly
it's
it
like,
it feels like we're getting worse.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
like we were talking about earlier. Sometimes it's more advantageous to fund an opponent on the other side to weaken a stronger opponent than it is to fund yourself. And the fact that this is the thinking within our electorate system, instead of, so we've talked about this previously, true capitalism is whoever has the best product wins. Modern crony capitalism is whoever can shit on the other guy the most wins. It defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, and
So
it
I think you're
ruins all of the
absolutely right.
goodness.
Yeah, I think campaign finance reform is a massive factor here as well.
Certainly very high on my priority list because I think it would
I
make
Getting that,
such
mean,
a difference.
yeah.
but guys,
But
we're
I
not
mean,
moving there.
a lot of this has been spelled out repeatedly over and over and over again. And again, like we talked about, I guess last week or the week before, you can get up there and shout it from the rooftops all you want to. I mean, the more you talk about it, the more other people will talk about it, hopefully. So don't stop talking about it. I guess that's
Yeah,
what you can do.
That's valid.
yeah, yeah. We talked a few weeks ago as one of our good news stories about the Montana plan and the way
Mhm.
that Montana is seeking to take campaign finance and the whole of Citizens United. And so I'm still watching it kind of in the background, what's going on, getting updates and things like that. And just a few days ago, Pete Buttigieg came out and endorsed it and said, hey, this makes sense. We need to do this. We need to define businesses as businesses, not as people. And
And
I
here's the
think that
thing.
that's
If you want
powerful.
your business to be able to contribute politically, I understand that, but that needs to be very closely monitored and limited
Mhm.
to say, hey, I work for Amazon. This would be advantageous for Amazon. We as a corporation think that this is who you should vote for. Great. All well and good. The problem is Amazon has a lot more money than I do. And so for them to be able to influence it in such an overweight
Okay.
manner is,
Noticed.
yeah, it's unfair to individuals to count Amazon as an individual because it's not.
The basic
If you
principle is simple that no corporation or any other kind of outside group should be able to distort decision making with massive wealth and dark money. That's what he said this past week.
It
Great.
really comes down to if we could have one vote. I mean, to me, this is a democratic crisis in that I don't feel like my vote counts. I can't convince most people that their vote counts. Amazon's gonna come in or the PACs are gonna come in and not identify any of that and make the difference. And I'm just sitting here spinning my wheels thinking, but that's not what everybody wants. And so it brings a level of frustration and distrust to what we want to call democracy.
For sure. But I think that that's where you've got all of these people and groups out there campaigning for you to vote with your dollars. We talked about Disney and Jimmy Kimmel and the First Amendment and all of these things here several weeks ago. And the network, ABC, was ready to take him off the air. And everybody said, fine, we're canceling all of our Disney subscriptions. We're not doing that. As their parent company, we're not supporting this. And a humongous corporation had to roll back eat their own words and say, shoot, we can't do that. That's going to impact our bottom line too significantly. We can't do that. Or you've had this whole several years long issue with Target of people saying, no, you've stepped out, you've stepped on us too many times. We're refusing to shop at Target anymore. We're not doing that. And if you sit down and look at Target's stock and how it has been impacted over the last several years, especially since COVID, it's been horrible. And so at the same time, like Cole, you always ask, like, but what can I do? I can't do anything. I can't do anything. But it's working too. And so I think that it is mobilizing people, but also yourself saying, hey, I think Amazon's a little out of control. I'm going to not order this thing from there. I'm
That's a
not
lot
going to do
easier
this.
said than done, though,
It is.
because sometimes they have the better product.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes they're the most efficient.
here's what I'm hearing you also say. It has nothing to do with voting. It has to do with
Money.
money, where I put my money. It doesn't mean I'm voting for Ted Cruz or Tallarico or Pete Buttigieg. And so maybe that's where we need
The
to go
reality is that it's both, because I can vote for whoever Amazon doesn't want all day long, but if I just keep giving them all of my money, they can outspend me and out advertise me and get what they want anyways.
well, and if we're going to allow the PACs to throw money at their opposition to make their opposition less strong or another, I mean,
Instead of putting up the better product,
yeah.
they're just denigrating another. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Degrading would probably be a better.
I
But
mean, I think we're at this point where we're defaulting to, well, the system is just rigged and everybody feels like the system is rigged against them. I
because it
kind
is,
of get that, but we got to find a way to do something about that.
And I
we
think that that's the
we
cool
as
part.
citizens have our own, yeah, we have our own loopholes, for lack of a better term, to exploit. We just have to actually do it, which is, again, much easier said than done.
You know, I can't remember if I've told this story or not on the podcast, but I was in Santiago, Chile here a few years ago, and I did not know when I was booking this trip and getting ready to go, but they were having weekly riots in the heart of the city. Every single Friday night, they had a group of people who would riot and protest 2% increases in public transportation costs.
Against 2% increases.
Uh-huh. For years, this went on. I've
That
never
is
seen
how
so
our
much
country
graffiti in my
started.
life. Uh-huh.
A
Yeah.
2% tax on tea.
And so it doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't take that all that much to have your voices heard, but you have to be using them.
I don't know. You said they've been doing this for years.
They had been, and it had gone down from a 4% increase. They were
So
making
they made
progress.
some progress.
I think where we get into the difficulty for it within our current political landscape is when you talk about something like that increase to public transit, that's bad for all of the citizens. None of the citizens want that. The issues that I feel like are propagated the most, at least within our news cycle, are issues, and maybe they're just presented as 50-50 issues and they're less so, but it makes people think that, oh, well, half the people want this and the other half don't. When in reality, it's more like a 90-10 or a 95-5 issue. And I think part of that has to do with, again, the fire hose of information that is constantly being forced down our throats. So I think you have to escape that to a certain extent to be even able to get started.
There are so very many issues
Sure.
that we all disagree on that maybe, I mean, Callie, when you were telling that story, I just kept thinking, I cannot imagine a group of Americans deciding that every Friday night they're going to go out and protest for years at a time on one topic.
Issue.
That's about the most American thing you can do.
But really, Cole, we're going to protest on 100 things, not just one. A- And and at this point, we're going to do it from a bipartisan standpoint because the other guy's so rotten and bad and awful. We're not even waiting to see. At this point, it's kind of, I feel like it's more like, well, he's a Democrat, so we have to not vote for him, or well, that's a Republican that wants that, so we can't join him. Where it might be a really valid thing, but we're so split politically that we can't do anything.
Here's a little tinfoil hat moment. Do you think it's possible, probable, likely that maybe the political hierarchy realizes that the corporations who are lobbying that political hierarchy realize that are corporations who run our national media, and that's why there are so many issues out there that are being highlighted and broadcast and exclaimed? So maybe it's intentional. Maybe they want us to disagree on all of these different topics so that we cannot unite.
Dun, dun, dun.
So what's the answer? I
Well,
mean,
we've talked about a
you've
few.
said we're not going to get term limits. We're probably not going to get PAC money out.
Here's the thing. I think we could get term limits. I think this is one of those things that we as a nation could unite on and say, hey, if you don't make a proposal for term limits, we're not going to vote for you again. Same party or not.
Let's do it.
But I think that that's the thing. I
We just
think
have
that
to get
that's
everyone
kind of,
else on board. We don't have to get Congress on board. We have to get everyone else on board.
Right.
but more than that, I think that we have to stop thinking that we have no power individually, independently. We have to stop this nihilistic viewpoint of saying, well, I'm not going to be able to do anything. We're never going to get term limits passed. We're never going to be able to get PAC money out. It just is what it is. Like, that's what they're hoping for.
I think another big thing is you've got to disconnect from and turn that fire hose off. You've got to learn to be able to focus on something, to tune the rest of it out, because hey, we can get to that problem later. Let's again, let's get the log out of our own eye before we worry about the splinter in our others.
I mean, Mom, I think that it does you and me and this country a disservice to make a comment about, well, we're never going to get PAC money out, especially when you've got stuff like the Montana plan actively in motion. Because all of a sudden you had a group of people who said, what if we did it this way?
I
What if
love
we
it.
leveraged that loophole?
I'm sending them positive vibes all of the time. I want to see something like that happen.
I think that
Maybe
that's where
we
our
can do more
optimism
than
matters.
send positive vibes. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. Write your representative, hey, we see what they're doing in Montana. We think you should do the same thing here in Texas. And
I'm
tell
sorry,
your
I'm
friends,
laughing.
tell your neighbors. Hell, write a letter, make it a Mad Libs, leave some blanks in it, and say, hey, I wrote this letter for you. Fill it out and send it to your representative. Sign it. Put this part in your own words.
Okay. Let's do it.
And you know
I
what? If they ignore you, don't vote for them again.
Yeah, and I think that all of this boils down to trust or lack thereof in our democracy. I can't trust you to make the right moves. I will not vote for you again. And I don't care which color tie you wear or which letter is next to your name. You have let me down. It is absolutely infuriating to me to get on threads and you've got a bunch of people right now just because of what's going on in the country and in time right now. You've got people who are coming out saying, "Hey, I voted for Donald Trump and I don't like where this is going and I'm really upset with this. I'm never voting Republican again." Like there isn't a stupider answer out there. There's not a stupider response out there. You
I
cannot
agree with you.
make some big, huge blanket statement like that and say, well, because I don't like this Republican who I voted into office, I'm never voting for another Republican. Like, that's
That's kind of
nuts.
like saying I went to a Mexican restaurant and got food poisoning, so I'm never eating Mexican food again. What about
What?
all of the other hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of Mexican food restaurants with great high quality food that won't make you sick? Maybe it's just the one. Maybe it was just that day.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like all of a sudden, if you take that mentality and say, "Hey, I'm never eating Mexican food again," and then you have an off day, all of a sudden at an Italian food restaurant, "Well, I'm never eating Italian food again either." Like, it just takes and narrows your
I'm just
entire
not going to eat
mind.
anymore.
Never again. I'm never voting Republican. I'm never voting Democrats. Now I'm never voting independents because they can't do anything. They can't get their act together. Like, okay, I'm just not going to vote. That's the freaking goal. That's what the people in power want from you. So many
You're
of them.
100% right.
It infuriates me. Not because I love Republicans, but because it's just such a stupid, ignorant move. That's a generalization that is just completely unfair to everyone and you.
Well, it's giving up on critical thought, which, as we've talked
Yeah.
about previously, is a massive weakness in our society right now, which
Yeah.
is, to me, again, exacerbated and fed by that fire hose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we can sit here and make incremental changes in various aspects of the way that our nation is governed, those things add up. It makes a difference. And if we all started saying, hey, I'm going to actually pay attention to the people that I'm voting for and how they have represented me and my district, and I'm going to hold them accountable, even if that's not going and saying, okay, Ted Cruz, slap on the wrist. That's saying, okay, Ted Cruz, I'm not voting for you anymore. I'm voting for your opponent because I've given you so many chances and you haven't done anything for me. You can hold people accountable in the ballot box. But we all have to do that. We all have to get on board. It can't just be Callie's the only person holding anybody accountable here. Ted Cruz doesn't give a shit about me. And so we cannot lean on our morals, sleep on our morals and say, well, it's just really hard. I'm
I'm
not doing
sitting
it
here and I'm
anymore.
just thinking, I'm going to say this. I don't think the three of us would vote for Ted Cruz. But if you don't vote and I don't vote for an opponent and, the other person ends up voting for Ted because, well, he's the Republican, we've screwed ourselves right there.
Yeah, we voted Ted
Just
Cruz in again.
we've we've voted him in. So we have to be really cognizant of the not voting or the lack of voting your conscience and for integrity. I mean,
Well,
there are
and
so many people right now that I think, wait a minute, wait a minute. Why I'm still totally appalled by a, a statement that was made that said something to the effect of Trump's morals don't matter because he's doing such good things. What?
His lack of morals. And
His lack of morals
it was,
don't matter.
what's his name? Graham.
Franklin Graham.
Yeah. I can look past him being an awful person because he's just doing such good stuff.
The
But here's the
ends
deal.
justify the means.
Yeah.
What if there's a guy out there or a woman out there who does have morals, does have integrity, and will do a good thing? Let's vote for that person.
Yeah.
Because that's harder. It's less efficient to get the thing done and do it in a morally sound fashion. And I get that as someone who craves efficiency. Like, I understand that argument. I don't necessarily agree with it because inefficiency drives me nuts. I get that. But at the same time, there are some instances where you have to sacrifice that efficiency because it's right. I think another interesting thing to highlight going back to the gerrymandering side, these people in power have access to more analytical tools than most of us can even imagine. And talking about that complacency mom was just referencing, if you think they don't know which districts are more and less likely to vote, and you think that's not considered and factored into these maps that they're redrawing, I think you're foolish.
I mean, they
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about it all the time, so you can't say it's not happening. We know how this group of blacks is gonna and how this group of college educated is gonna and how this group of women, it's all there. They're telling us they know.
And do not for 1 second think that big tech is not involved in all of this.
100%.
If you think that you are out here benefiting from using their platform more than they are benefiting from you using their platform, you're nuts.
There's an old adage, I don't know, maybe not that old, but there's an internet adage, we will say, if you're not paying for something, you're the product.
You're the product. You're the
Can I
product.
just say here, I kind of feel like I'm in a reverse world where y'all are the ones saying, "We can do this, we can do this. It's gonna get better." And I'm the one going, "It it's I don't see how we can fix this." I just kind of feel like I'm in a reverse world.
Do you think that and this, I do not mean this in any disrespectful manner at all. Do you think any of that has to do with your age?
Well, I'm usually the one going, "America's great. We're the smartest, we're the bravest, and
But you also
it's
know that you've been lied to throughout this
yeah.
podcast and the experience that we've had. You have come to new conclusions to say all of this crap that I was fed wasn't true, wasn't real, wasn't accurate. I think that, oh my gosh, mom, I think that makes you woke. But I mean, I also wonder if part of it is kind of that Eeyore mentality is I've been watching this go on for so long. There's nothing left that we can do. I'm tired.
I don't think that's age specific. I think that is just being really aware of how much crap is going on and the fire hose. I mean, when you look at this, when you look at the Supreme Court with the Voting Rights Act, when you look at gerrymandering, when you look at the PACs, when you look at where the money is going, oh my gosh, when you look at how much money we are spending on political campaigns on a regular basis, nobody's questioning that, we're spending $1 billion here for uh, it's crazy to me.
Imagine how badass our roads and schools and hospitals would be
Yes.
if we took
There
half
wouldn't
of that money
there wouldn't be a
and
concern about
dedicated it
Social
to that.
Security. I mean, people could actually have good health care. I mean, look at what it would take if we took, like you said, Cole, half the money that is being spent today on political campaigns, if we limited that and used that money in some holy cow, we could buy Spirit Airline next week.
That's it's a racket because the reason they spend so much on these is because they're making money hand over fist. They're sucking that money out of the economy for their own personal wealth and for the wealth of whoever helps keeping them hold that seat.
And I think that we have to remember and remind ourselves what the purpose of fanning the flames of division is. We know based on history alone that the most effective way to collapse a population is to exploit its existing divisions. We know that. So, mom, it's like you were talking about earlier. Well, there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and all these things. That's a strategy because
It's the
generally,
strategy.
it's the strategy because generally speaking, if you're over here and I'm over there and Cole's over here and so and so's over there, like We can't focus our efforts and pay attention to one thing to go and say, this is ridiculous. We need to change this.
You remember I believe is it Sun Tzu, divide and conquer? That's not about splitting your army in two. That's about splitting your enemy in two.
It's strategy. And I think that you can look at gerrymandering and you can look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and you can just sit here and see how so many people, Americans, don't understand it. And so instead of doing something about that, instead of educating themselves, they just wash their hands and say, too hard. I don't want to deal with that.
Here's the deal. If we passed a law, 61 years ago to take care of a problem that we saw, and 61 years later, we haven't resolved that problem, something is wrong.
I
Well,
hate
here's
to
the
break
thing.
it to you, but something is wrong.
Yeah. For one, I think the problem that that specific act was designed to fix was certainly alleviated at the time by that act. I think this is a different problem.
I agree with you.
I would agree with you as well. I
It's the
don't know that I
loophole.
would say it was alleviated. I think that it was attempted to be alleviated, but again, theory and reality are not always the same.
Yeah.
And I think
We
that,
can have that debate another day, but
yeah, I mean, I think that the parties just kind of change. And I'm not talking the political parties, which do change and ebb and flow, but the parties who are being infringed upon changes. I mean,
sure. And I think the route to control those political outcomes has changed.
mhm, yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because we are in the information age. I think a lot of that is because of the setup and the changes to our economic system over the course of the last century. New loopholes have been discovered or designed to take advantage of.
Okay, I'm ready for a weird thought.
All right. This one goes right along with the conversation that we have had today. According to Gallup, who is, if you weren't aware, one of the premier uh,
Holsters?
polling pollsters, yeah, thank you, polling agencies in the United States, probably globally, Congress has fallen to a 10% approval rating. Just to take a step back and talk about this, if they have a 10% approval rating, how are there so many incumbents still in office? Why do we have like a 90% incumbency win rate if we have a 10% approval rating? Their historic low is 9%.
In the history of Congress.
That means if you go talk to 10 people, first of all, I don't necessarily understand how it's only 10% because no one I know approves of Congress. I think I could go talk to 100 people and maybe one of them would approve of Congress.
Well, so that's the thing, though.
Congress approves of Congress. So there you go.
But
Exactly.
that's
They're the one in
thing.
100.
There are two pieces to this, two statistics of this that need to be discussed. Not only do they only have a 10% approval rating, this current Congress has an 86% disapproval rating. So
That
you're
means
like, hey, I
more
can't
than
think
eight
of
and a
all these
half out of
people
10 people don't like them.
actively, not could care less, not are neutral, actively disapprove of them.
Disapprove.
So when you have that in conjunction with a 10% approval rating, I feel like you just kind of have to laugh a little bit.
Or
Like,
do
if this is the
something.
case, I feel
Yes.
like what should be happening is, I mean, I guess I kind of understand the lazy mentality of, "Oh, I'm just going to go to the voting poll, and if I'm red, I'm going to put a check mark next to all of the R's, and if I'm blue, I'm going to put a check mark next to all of the D's." But here's the thing. What we should be saying is, hey, if I've seen your name on a sign for reelect, not that one,
Yeah.
not that one.
Wouldn't it be cool if we could put something in place that if Congress approval rating goes down to X percent, everybody's gone and we vote in completely new people?
Oh, man, I feel like
I love it.
I really like the idea. I feel like that would be A, extremely difficult to enforce, and B, extremely easy to manipulate.
You think it would be easy to manipulate?
Cole thinks everything is easy to manipulate, though.
And he's valid on, he's right on a bunch of stuff.
He's not wrong.
If
Hey,
we could get
this
an
is my
airtight
fantasy.
way to enforce that, no, I'm with you. If we could get an airtight, unmanipulatable way to enact something like that, great,
Let's do it.
great. But can we get term limits first?
Yes.
Because term
Well,
limits
that would be
solves a
term
lot of
limits.
that.
I mean,
That
seriously.
it'd be a different
That's an
kind of
extra
term
level
limit.
above term limits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, there are some drawbacks with that as well. Because what if you've got 10% of the people there that are really trying to do a good job and now you've eliminated them as well? I mean,
I know.
maybe
There's
they're
that
not
whole
doing a good
argument
enough
about,
job if they can't get the other 90% on board.
yeah, or putting in totally new people who don't know the system, you're expecting a disaster to happen. But I mean, we kind of have a disaster happening right now. So can it be worse?
Yeah, but okay,
Yes.
if we really want to go and look at it, 100% it can, because if we're being really honest, we've kind of had a rolling disaster for the last 250 years.
Raining on my parade.
Welcome to being alive.
But I'm going to say that you kind of missed the punchline here.
Yeah. I was just going to say.
Oh,
Who has a higher rating than Congress?
and this
Approval
may
rating
shock
right
some
now.
of you. The IRS currently has a higher approval rating than Congress. The IRS is at like historically, like what, 12 to 15%?
Yeah.
I think so.
So the people who take your money for taxes are more liked than the 119th Congress. If that ain't saying something, I don't know what is.
Well, because the IRS is just the ones taking it. It's Congress that's blowing it on dumb stuff.
Yeah,
I
that's true.
mean,
Or putting in the laws that nobody can understand. So I love it. Thank you for that funny story. We needed that one then.
Yeah.
Who's
Can we
got my
get some good
good news
news?
story?
I've got some good news. So I thought that this was really interesting and connects really well with today's episode about voting registration or representation and who gets power and how unpopular Congress is right now. So, for the first time in American history, a state legislature is majority women. In New Mexico,
Woo!
in New Mexico, women now make up 54% of the legislature, making it the first state in the entire country where women are actually the majority instead of the exception. So what's interesting is New Mexico became the first state in United States to permanently guarantee the right to early education, early childhood education in their state constitution, making future lawmaker or meaning that future lawmakers can't just come in and vote it away when political winds change, right? Which is a big deal. They have also provided free childcare for more than 40,000 families. So that's kind of a big deal. So just for the record, the population of New Mexico is like 2.2 million people. So 40,000 families is not a small number in the grand scheme of things. It has given, but the opportunity for free childcare has given those 40,000 families the chance to have jobs, the freedom to go to work and support their families. This legislature has secured $1 billion in clean energy investments for rural communities specifically, and it has expanded schools and healthcare access in areas that were being overlooked and strengthened reproductive healthcare protections to be enshrined in their constitution. Forever. Forever. the way that they have gone about all of this. So something else that I thought was really cool, that you have Latina and Indigenous women serving in leadership at historic levels. So all of these kids growing up, especially in and around New Mexico, are growing up seeing women in charge being normal, not unusual, not groundbreaking. It's just how leadership looks. So obviously, no political group gets everything right, and representation alone doesn't magically solve anybody's problems, everybody's problems. But I do think that it raises an interesting question that fits our conversation today. When different people get a seat at the table, do different priorities naturally rise to the top? So, going back to term limits, going back to taking money out of politics the same way. I mean, there are so many benefits to representation being representative of the communities.
Wow.
So it was so cool. And again, it's one woman and another woman and another woman building these individual ripple effects that have changed the state of New Mexico. And I think that that's really cool. Good news.
I love it. That's great news.
So,
Cole, what's your take on that? As a man, do you see that as a positive or a negative?
I don't necessarily see it as either. I don't think being a man or a woman makes you inherently better or worse. I think, like, I know this is going to sound awful. Like,
perfect.
agreeing with me makes you better or worse. Like, having a similar moral structure to me, if we are aligned, and that's super tribal. I get that. But I mean, here's the thing. If you have a group of 100 people and 49 are men and 51 are women, and you're going to make a tribunal to govern those people, representatively, slightly more than half of your tribunal should be women. Do I think that
There you go.
means that they're always going to make the right decision?
No.
But I think they're going to be representative of their population.
And that's the point.
I just wonder here, I think you're absolutely right that that's representative. So I think that's really good. I, I also wonder, though, if because they are looking at this from a new perspective, that they're really concentrating on the things that are coming to the top and they're taking care of some of those things.
Yeah. This goes
It's
back
a
to that
really,
DEI conversation as well, though. In that same example, you don't just get to pick 51 random women or whatever it is, 11 out of your 20 representatives. They need to
right.
be the best of the best women. They need to be the best of
You
the
know
best
what?
men.
I'd settle for really good women and really good men. They wouldn't
Why?
have to be the best because it's going to be an improvement over what we have.
Calm down, Eeyore. Shoot for the moon. Shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you're still among the stars, right? So don't lower your
I think
standards.
that's
Say,
where
oh,
she's at,
really good
though.
is okay. No, shoot for the best. Shoot for the best
Holy
every
cow.
single time.
This is a backwards world I'm in tonight. But I still love y'all.
Love you guys.